Nathan, thanks so much for joining me here this morning on this nice, fresh Vic Falls. We've just had some lovely rain again this week. Very, very welcome. Nathan, could we just start by, please tell us, who is Nathan? Where did you grow up? What are your interests?
Sure. Well, Luke, thanks so much for having me. It's good to be here. Good to chat. A Zimbabwean-born guy that has had a passion for the bush since I was a young boy. I often remember going camping with my folks, and on the last day I would go and hide behind the nearest tree and hope my parents would leave me behind, so I didn't have to go back to the jungle that is Harare. Anyway, it never worked. First time my mom called, I'd pop out and come running down. But I've always just had this love and desire to be in the bush from a very young age. I've been very blessed and fortunate to have a career that's seen me in the bush, predominantly in the tourism commercial sector. I started out as a junior guide, as a bird guide for a safari business for a few years. And yeah, my career just took a route that saw me run lodges and businesses in the commercial sector. I think one of the very fortunate things that we have in Zimbabwe is that a lot of our wildlife-based tourism is very conservation-minded. Everyone puts money towards conservation, or even establishes their own conservation initiatives within their setup. I was part of an organization that had a similar vision. So conservation has always been a part of my upbringing, even within the commercial sector. But I moved full-time into conservation about 16 months ago now, having volunteered with the various organizations I run now for a few years. I thought, no, it's time to dedicate my life to the cause, and took the leap a year or so ago now. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Let's go back to some of those early days. What were you mentioned growing up in Harare and just dying to get out of the big smoke, if you like.
Yeah.
What were the areas of the country you were really exploring at that time?
Well, I mean, look, I'm very fortunate that my parents, my dad always had a philosophy in life. We would live his life until we were 18. If we didn't like it, tough, we had to deal with it. We're under his roof until we were 18. We live his life, and we were very fortunate that his life was one that saw him try and get into the bush as much as possible. So on weekends, there was a dam probably about 2 or 3 hours drive from Harare called Musfikade. We used to go there most weekends. I remember even being picked up from school. Mom makes you fold your uniform up nicely, because Monday we're leaving early and you've got to put that same uniform back on to get to school. So some weekends we wouldn't even see our house. We would literally leave from school straight out to the lake, back in on Monday, and put our uniforms back on. And it was just, we had the freedoms to go and fish or go and explore the bush. There wasn't a lot of animals in the area at the time, but it was nature. We were out in nature and away from the hustle and bustle that was Harare. We used to do a big trip every year through from Harare up to Matopus, and then from Matopus we would spend probably about 2 weeks in Hwange National Park, and that's where the real love and passion came for wildlife. I mean, that place is phenomenal.
Would you say that's your favorite spot?
I got married there. It's definitely one of my favorite spots in Zim. It's just so raw. It's an incredible, humbling experience being within nature in that form, and it's massive. I mean, it's a huge area. It's got lots to offer, lots of unexplored territory there. I'd love to just get on foot and disappear into that park for a couple of years and just explore what's going on. And life just carries on there. That's what the really lovely part about it is. Humans think that they're the top of this pinnacle on our world, and we are to some degree. But the rest of the world doesn't need us. Nature doesn't need us. If we were to leave this planet, the world would carry on probably better than it is now. We're not very good global citizens at the moment. But and that I love. You can just watch animals be animals, and we're just observing their life. And that really, really sticks with me every time I go into the bush.
Why do you think it is that we have this, as human beings, feeling that we are in control? Is it just something that, we must be in control, yet, as you say, very possibly we're not?
Yeah. Look, I think I think we are in control. We determine so much of what happens around the world at the moment. We're hearing it being spoken about all the time, and even just our factories and the emissions that they're making, how that's affecting the entire climate. We're having a huge impact on our environment, and unfortunately, I think we're being driven by the wrong motivations as a race, I think, or as a population. I think we are driven by profit, driven by living the best life we can, and unfortunately the ecosystems and the important things around us don't take precedent anymore. So yeah, that's the hardest part about the conservation industry, is just realizing how big the challenge is because of what we're facing as a human race around the world.
I think therein lies the complexities around this issue, because, as you say, on the one breath, you go into a place like Hwange National Park, and you recognize that, as so far as the natural environment is, we're not really in control.
No. Yeah.
Put us there for a night or two with nothing.
Yeah.
And the chances are we won't survive.
Most definitely. Yeah.
But there are certain things that we are in control of, where if we don't control them properly, potentially it spells our own disaster, but not necessarily the long-term disaster of the environment, but certainly, I don't know if I've put that in the right way.
Hwange National Park, for example, it's been a park for almost 100 years now. It's certainly Zim's oldest and one of Africa's oldest national parks. We've just come through a pretty hectic drought. Some are saying it's the worst drought in living memory for us here in this region of Zimbabwe. It's been tough. We've mostly pulled through. I mean, you spoke about the rain earlier, and it's incredible how life just changes the moment rain starts falling. It's phenomenal. But we as humans designated Hwange National Park as the place that animals should be. It wasn't the animals that chose that place. I guarantee if we had given the animals the choice, they'd be in the lush farmlands of Mashonaland, where we've taken it for agriculture to feed humans. The animals would have taken that area because it's more suitable to what they need. Mm-hmm. I doubt they would have chosen the arid conditions of Hwange as their place of residence. It's us that have dictated that. So we influence a lot. We influence so much around the world, and so much long-term effects come from decisions that we make. So it's big. It's a big issue.
So Nathan, we've established your love for Hwange, which I think is at the top of your list, which is obviously prudent in the work that you're doing at the moment.
Very much.
Maybe we can sort of start diving into that. Tell us about the organizations that you're with, what they're about, and a little bit of their history.
Sure. So I think Hwange was my introduction to the real bush. I think it's always going to have a soft spot for me. It's always going to have a place that's special in my heart. But since then, I've visited some truly extraordinary wild areas. So Hwange is the start, but the bush is my love. Any bush that's pristine is a place that I love, and it's what led me to move full time into conservation. COVID was a hectic thing for the world, and particularly for the tourism industry in Zimbabwe. Victoria Falls is completely reliant on international travel. So when international travel stopped, it changed a lot of lives. It put a seed in me that I need to start following my passion. Not that I didn't enjoy what I was doing, but I was longing more and more to be in the bush. I've been volunteering with some fantastic organizations that had started up here in Victoria Falls. The first one is known as Victoria Falls Anti-Poaching Unit, started by a gentleman called Charles Brightman back in 1999. So we're now 25 years old as a unit. I've been doing a lot of volunteer work with him, particularly during COVID when everyone was shut away. Poaching went through the roof, and there needed to be a lot of help and a lot of assistance to try and mitigate that as much as possible. So I got quite involved there. And then also I worked a little bit with another organization called Bhejane Trust, which was started by a gentleman called Trevor Lane in 2009. They have two major pillars of conservation. One is rhino monitoring and protection in Hwange National Park. So beautiful area and not very many rhino. There was an estimated 400 rhino as we entered the 2000s. By the time we got involved in 2010, there was probably 6 left, and poaching being the main cause. So we're up to just over 10 at the moment. It's not a very viable population as it stands, but we very...
Sorry, those are black rhino.
Black rhino, yeah,
okay.
yeah. So we're very happy to say that we haven't lost a rhino to poaching since we've been involved, but as I said, the population is not big enough to be viable. So it's work in progress, and there's a lot of work that we are going towards to try and achieve a viable rhino population there. But very, very early into our work, we realised that water is a massive issue, particularly in Hwange, which is considered a semi-arid environment. There isn't any permanent water source that's natural, and since Hwange's inception, artificial water has been the main source of water for animals during the dry season. The infrastructure was there, but very little of it was working. So we very quickly got involved in helping to rehabilitate the artificial water structure. We upgraded from diesel pumps, which was the sort of norm back then, and we introduced the first solar-powered boreholes in about 2010, 2011. We now run 52 across the northwest part of the country.
Just out of what does it cost to power a water hole?
So the cost to power the water hole is quite minimal.
Okay.
The cost to set up the water hole is
right.
where it's quite expensive.
Okay.
So it's very variable, but it can cost anything between $8,000 and $15,000.
Wow.
A lot depends on the depth that you drill. If you drill and you hit water at 10 meters, it's going to cost you a lot less than if you have to drill to 200 meters. So the actual drilling is where the price varies quite a bit. But to establish the solar panels and the pump and the piping and everything is pretty stagnant. So anywhere between $8,000 and $15,000 is what we usually estimate. It usually it rounds out to about $10,000.
So there's a big capital outlay at the start. Yeah. And then after that, is it relatively easy to maintain? What are the threats? So I understand there's theft in this.
Yeah, always. So theft is a big thing. We learned a lot of lessons early on with having solar panels stolen. We've mastered the art of securing them now. We still very so often get attempts to steal, but because we've well, they end up just breaking the panel, which still is a big challenge for us because we're now going to replace it. But I think what's helped there also is that the price of solar has really reduced. I mean, when we first started out, we were paying about $1 per watt on the power of a solar panel. So a 100-watt solar panel is $100. You can now pick up a 500-watt solar panel for $100. I mean, it's the price has come significantly down. So the value of the panels to the thief is not as high anymore.
Okay.
We have started upgrading a lot of our systems to add battery backup because it's just not enough. I mean, we're pumping just under 1.6 million liters of water a day.
Wow,
it's not enough. It's really not enough.
And just for the layman person who doesn't really understand, but is there enough water underground? How often do these boreholes dry up?
So touch wood, we haven't had any yet.
Okay.
It's the eternal question: is what is the underground water reserve? Is it a stagnant reserve that's not being replenished? Is it being replenished?
Right.
There was some work done by WWF probably a decade or so ago now, which seemed to believe that the water comes from up near the Hwange Delta, the underground water. So they believe it is a replenishing source. We have a few tests that we run a couple of times a month just to monitor the underground reserves. We call it a recovery rate. So, when your borehole's not running, when your pump's not running, your water sits at a certain level underground. So if your hole's 100 meters, your resting rate might be at 20 meters. That's where the water is sitting. When you pump, that drops down to maybe 40 meters because now your pump's sucking water and it gets down to 40. We then measure how quickly it takes to recover, to get back to the resting rate. And then we compare that over the years that we've been doing it. And so far, touch wood, we haven't seen a massive change in the recovery rate, which would be your first indication that there's an issue underground. So
just coming back to, this is Bhejane's responsibility, 52 of these across Hwange National Park.
No, so it's across the northwest of the country. So our mandate with the authority, so we partner our national parks authorities in this initiative, is across just the northern parts of Hwange, so Robbins and Sinamatela areas. There's another organization that handles the main campsite. And then we also filtered into Kazuma National Park, which is between Hwange and Victoria Falls, and then we also handle Zambezi National Park here in Victoria Falls. So that 52 is across that region. And it's a lot of work. We have 4 guys that are literally, that's their job. Every day they head out and they've got various routes that they do. To go and check their panels, check their pumps. We do meter readings, so every single one of our boreholes has got a meter on it, so we know exactly how much water we've pumped. Some of our holes are pumping 120,000 litres a day into them, so it's significant. Wow. We clean the panels, particularly in your sort of September, October time when it's really dusty and the wind's picked up. Dusty panels can lose between 5 and 15% efficiency. So, and that's the time of year you need them the most. It's hot, it's dry, so you need them to be working at optimum pressure. And deal with elephant damage. I mean, the elephants are super intelligent animals, and they always find a way to get to the fresh water. We're forever fixing pipes that have been pulled up and pulled pumps down from 100 meters. They figured out that's where the water's coming from, and they just haul this pump up, and can be very destructive things.
Coming to elephants, just on that point, and maybe going slightly off topic, but elephants in Hwange, I think some of the highest concentrations of African elephant left in Africa.
Yeah, second highest in the world.
How many do you estimate in Hwange?
So 2022 was the last aerial census that was done by CASA. They put it at just over 62,000 in Hwange National Park alone.
62,000 elephants.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 3 or 4 tons on average, maybe more, less of animals. So, and drinking up to how much? 100 litres of water?
Well, average, so if you go from the smallest to the biggest, you're averaging out about 100 litres a day. So you're needing over 6 million litres of water a day. Yeah.
Is it sustainable going forward to think that, so I know it's a tough question.
So we are not academics. We are practical men and women in our organization that see a problem and implement a solution based on what we feel is going to be best. We're not arrogant about it. We ask advice, we ask opinion, we learn as much as we can. But one of our biggest questions is adding water is not helping reduce the elephants, or not reduce, but stagnate the elephants at least.
Yes.
All it's doing is saying to the elephants, "Hey, things are good. Let's have more babies." I think before we get onto the elephant discussion, I think we need to celebrate the conservation success that is this region, Hwange, Chobe. We've 80% of the world's remaining elephant population are in this Kazi region here. That is a fantastic achievement that's been made from a conservation standpoint. Yes, there's discussions that are had about too many elephants in certain areas. That's a discussion we can have. We've got to celebrate the fact that we've got to that point.
Sure. Okay. We won't dive too far into that because I know that we could have a whole nother debate on that. But I did want to touch on it, and I think also important because a lot of the people watching may not understand the geography or the lay of land as intimately as you do, or even myself growing up in this area. But just to also paint that picture that Hwange National Park is not confined by fences. Obviously, it shares a border with Botswana, and these animals move freely, mistaken, in and out of the parks in Botswana as well. Historically, they may have moved even further, and I think Kaza, which you mentioned, Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, if I've got it right, would like to reset that again so that these creatures can move as far up as Angola. Yeah. So yeah,
that's the plan. And just on that, I think water can be used to achieve that. So yes, there's 62,000 elephants in Hwange at the moment, and it's probably too many for what Hwange can handle.
Right.
But I think water can be used to help that disbursement, identifying corridors to get them to Lua Plains, let's say, in Zambia, using water along the routes to sustain their journey, and then they enter Lua, and then from Lua to wherever else they're going. So that's a much bigger conservation picture, but it is discussions that we're having at the moment to not only expand and give animals the opportunity to expand from Hwange, but to help alleviate some of the pressure that's in Hwange. Because water is vitally important. We all know that water is life, but food is equally a challenge, particularly in the dry times of year. So our water program not only aims to put in water, but it does so by establishing water points in areas that don't usually have water, so it opens up more grazing. We're very conscious of the fact that you can't just keep establishing water holes. I think there's probably only 2 water holes that we feel we can still establish in the Hwange ecosystem, and that'll again open up a bit more grazing for certain animals. But after that, you can't have a water hole around every corner. That's for sure. It would degrade the ecosystem quite significantly, particularly the vegetation. So we're now moving on to ensuring that we can get maximum yield out of the current holes that we've got. There may also be plans in the future to rehabilitate some of the existing surface water infrastructure, particularly in the Robbins area of Hwange. There's a lot of evidence of old weirs, old dam walls that were installed to capture rainwater and just create a lot more surface water. So we may look at expanding to some of that over the next few years. Otherwise, it's just a care and maintenance program now. You've got to look after the stuff that you've got to ensure that it carries on going. We've just done a big upgrade of a lot of our pumps and inverters this year. Obviously, with the drought, we wanted to make sure everything was running well. Some of them have been going for 10 years. Our one at Big Tom's clocked over at 1 million litres last year. That's how many litres that inverter and that pump.
Wow.
It's did very well for us.
So looking at now, based on what you've said, I think water obviously being a key role that Bhejane is taking to make sure that the landscape is adequate for big game animals, which obviously spills over to the smaller stuff. It starts me thinking about the level of collaboration that you need to have over such a wide and vast landscape. The work that you're doing in one area may not necessarily be mirrored by someone else doing something else in their area, and the fact is that you're confined by many reasons to a particular area. And I want to come back onto that just now about how do you get the whole landscape to work together as opposed to just your area. But before I do that, maybe we can talk about VAPU, Victoria Falls Anti-Poaching Unit, and that is the other organization that you are leading. And you mentioned it was founded by Charles Brightman back in 99.
25 years old.
Can you give us a little bit of an understanding of what that organization does?
So I took the plunge to go full-time conservation for 2 reasons. One, for my own personal benefit, but 2, each of these gentlemen who have started these organizations and dedicated their life to conservation are now in the twilight years of their lives, and very little plan for succession. So the work that they've done and the dedication they've put in runs a real risk of stopping without them at the helm. So that was a big driving force to me to make sure that what these guys have started isn't just something that's around their name, but something that lives on for many years. So I'm very happy to take that mantle and be that succession plan, and so far so good. Victoria Falls Anti-Poaching Unit is one that's very close to my heart. Anti-poaching is something I've been passionate about since my early days in the bush. I would always join the units, even as a guide. I was fortunate enough to head up a couple of units in my younger days at various different camps, and it was established in Victoria Falls to mitigate the very real risk of a growing human population and a growing wildlife population. I think Victoria Falls has got to be one of the most unique destinations in the world where you have such coexistence between animals and people. This morning, I was a few minutes late for our chat because I left literally drove out my gate, and there was a couple of guys standing on the side of the road and 6 big old dugger boys walking down the road. So I blocked the guys off.
What's a dugger boy for those that
don't know? Dugger boy is a big old male buffalo. So yeah, cantankerous old bugger. They come into town quite a bit, and it's incredible. I mean, even though I've seen it countless times, I find myself just in awe at how fortunate and blessed we are to be in a place like this where, you know, you're late for a meeting because you're herding buffalo out of town to keep people safe. It's I don't know who else has challenges like that. So it's an incredibly unique destination, and we can celebrate the coexistence that people and animals have in this area. It's not perfect by any means, but I think it's unique. And one of the main reasons it is still like that is the work that VAPU has done for the last 25 years. I've only been with the unit a year and a bit now, so I can quite happily say that the situation would be very different if VAPU had not been doing what they're doing.
So what does, can you tell us about the life of a ranger in an anti-poaching unit? What do they do? They get up and do they get up and start work at 8 and finish at 6?
No way. No. It's no. You got to be a ghost when you're an anti-poaching guy. You got to be someone that is known about, but not known where they are, what they're doing. So we have very flexible hours, very flexible days. Sometimes I'll start work and just disappear for 2 hours, and then come back just to throw people's understanding of what they're doing and where they are. So we've got a vast area to cover. We help within the national park, and we help obviously within the Victoria Falls city. I would say our most challenging role of our time is within the city limits of Victoria Falls. We have wildlife corridors that move through our town. It's purposely done to keep the wild aspect, but when you have high populations of people and high populations of animals, inevitably there's going to be unethical elements to that, which is what we try and mitigate. And there's a lot. I mean, I would say we're dealing with, between 3 and 6 incursions a week, just in this area.
And what is an incursion? What is that?
It's an attempt by poachers to kill our animals.
Okay, and what sort of ways do they do?
So look, we're quite fortunate that our firearms poaching is relatively low in this area. It happens, and obviously we mitigate that as best we can. We work very closely with the wildlife authorities, who are quite an effective unit, and when resourced to do so, and they've had some fantastic done some fantastic work over the last 5 or 6 years, particularly in mitigating the elephant poaching threat. Obviously, with the region having 80% of the continent's elephants, that's the target for poachers. But they've done some fantastic work in mitigating that. So, touch wood, at the moment, we've had to deal with 2 incursions this year. That's it, which is great. It's always it's an ever-present threat, and it's determined by the global movement of ivory. If the ivory price goes up, obviously the threat increases. So there's a lot of factors that influence.
So the stakes kind of get bigger.
Yes.
The bigger the item
exactly.
that the poacher's going for.
Yeah. And look, whilst ivory is one of those romantic topics in the anti-poaching world. It's ivory, rhino horn, pangolin scale. Those are the three major topics that sort of dominate anti-poaching efforts around the world, and they are they're hugely important. They're the most valuable, so they seem to draw the most attention. One of the most devastating forms of poaching is bushmeat. Bushmeat annihilates across the ecosystem spectrum. It takes everything from guinea fowl and francolin all the way up to buffalo and giraffe. We have guys that target giraffe here in the bushmeat realm. The way the poachers go for the bushmeat is through snaring. Snaring is a very simple tool. It's a piece of wire, maybe 2 or 3 meters long, made into a hangman's noose that they set up over a path or something. And the idea is that the animal walks through and the noose gets caught around their neck. As it tightens, they panic, they start struggling, the noose gets tighter, and they succumb to this wire. Often they don't. Often it gets caught around their horns or around their hoof or somewhere other that's not fatal, and you end up having an animal that suffers for days sometimes. Others will manage to break the wire and they run away with an incredibly tight bracelet or something strapped around their horns, which they will often die from later. And then many of them catch animals that are not the intended target. And the poacher sets it up hoping to catch an impala, and that path gets walked on by a leopard before an impala, and the leopard now gets caught in the snare. And so it really is very, very devastating to the ecosystem in its entirety.
What portion do you think of poachers are just trying to get some meat to feed their family versus we are in this because this is where we can make a lot of money and we're bad guys? Not that I'm trying to say the person that is killing an animal is not a bad guy.
So it depends where we draw that line. There is a level of subsistence poaching, we call it. So guys that are literally just trying to do it to survive. That is in 2 parts. You've got a guy that'll hunt an impala and feed his family with that impala, but you've also got guys that will hunt a buffalo, sell the meat, and raise money to feed their family. So it's all connected. It's challenging emotionally. Probably one of the most devastating forms of poaching that we deal with to our ecosystem is firewood. I estimate 1,000 kgs a day of firewood is leaving our wild spaces here. That's a lot, and a growing threat. In fact, you can see how rapidly it's growing because the distance that people are now traveling to gather this firewood has gone from literally the boundary to almost 1.5 k's into the park to collect this wood. Most of it, I'd say about 50-60% of it, is literally ladies who are gathering sticks and twigs that they carry on their heads to cook food, boil water, and create warmth for their family for a couple of days. And that's incredibly challenging and emotionally exhausting trying to deal with that, because that you arrest that lady today, tomorrow she's going to be back doing the same thing because she has no alternative. There is no other way that she can look after her family and do what she needs to do without that resource that is the firewood. And the same is with the subsistence poachers that are just trying to kill something to feed their families. I often have this discussion with people where I say, okay, let's flip it around. That man who's gone into the bush and he's killed that duiker because his family is hungry at home and he's just trying to feed his family. How would the world perceive that same man if he walked into a supermarket and just helped himself to 20 kgs of meat because his family is starving and he wants to feed them? They would not look upon it the same as him taking it out of the bush. Even so, let him come to your bank account and take $50 so he can go and look after himself. People would not accept that. So someone has to police the bush. People police the supermarkets, people police your bank account to stop people coming and taking it. Most of the petty crime that happens around the world is people just trying to survive. Someone's got to police the bush, and that's us. And if you don't mitigate it, it can really get out of control. And there is definitely a link between the level of poverty in an area and the level of poaching. The higher the poverty, the higher the poaching. That's a much bigger challenge to try and alleviate poverty around the world. So we do what we can by trying to mitigate the poaching as best we can.
Is it important, do you think, and I realize, to be able to distinguish that, and I think that's important for people to understand that, hey, hang on a moment here, our role is to make sure that we keep the environment pristine, but how do you, the lines seem to blur a bit in terms of, does a community can't be forgotten because the community is part of the whole ecosystem.
Absolutely.
So are there programs, either yourselves at Bhejane and Vapu are involved with, to provide resources or education or incentives to the community to not impact on the bush? Or is that an area that you're saying, listen guys, we're so busy with what we're doing, that's for others to handle?
Yeah, look, I think there's elements of both there. And not necessarily we're so busy, but you also, you can be a jack of all trades or you can be a master of one. And our passion, our expertise, our drive is in the anti-poaching, boots on the ground, protecting the environment. To ask that ranger to now go and run a class for some kids or for whoever it is that we're doing, it's not necessarily what he's good at, it's not his skill. But what we have done is partnered with people that are more passionate about that and are more skilled at delivering those messages. And I think that's one of the major benefits of Victoria Falls, is that there are quite a few organizations that are trying to make a difference, and in various different fields. And we're all, being such a small community, we all talk to each other, we're all friends, we all have a beer together, whatever, so we can have those open discussions and work with each other on a very real level. And yeah, that's exactly what we've done with our work in the community. So we do awareness campaigns with various other organizations. Every week we have a ranger who joins a conservation education class. Our target audience there is your 11 to 12 year olds. And yeah, he delivers the message from a place of experience. He comes straight out of the bush in his full uniform with all his regalia and his all his equipment, and you can see the kids they take it a lot more seriously than being delivered by a teacher who's probably got very little real world anti-poaching or conservation experience. So yeah, it's great. Just going back on the subsistence stuff. So what I think it's having the desired impact, because I would say probably only about 20% of the poaching that we deal with is what we would class subsistence. And I say that because
so 80% of the poaching incidents or incursions that you're dealing with have got a commercial. So there's it's just pure greed, basically. 100%. Looking to make lots of money.
Well, I mean, look, not even lots of money. I mean, a buffalo carcass is being sold for as little as $80 here. $80 for a whole buffalo carcass. I mean, looking at probably 300, 400 kgs of meat there, and it's being sold for as little as $80. So there's still an element of trying to survive, but it's an informal market, which is one of the only that's available in Victoria Falls.
So I read some statistics that the illegal wildlife trade is right up there in the top 5 with human trafficking, drug smuggling, arms. So are we seeing that whilst you say that a buffalo goes for about $80, is that just at the grassroots level? We're talking, obviously this is going up a chain and the money grows as it gets bigger. So, what sort of shadowy characters are involved in this? I'm not looking for names, but we're into organizations that are necessary, that could be involved in terrorist activities, for example.
So where your real high-end poaching comes, and you're right, it's organized crime. It's very, very much organized crime, but it's mostly dealing with the high-value commodities. So rhino horn. I mean, rhino horn's fetching anywhere between $70,000 and $100,000 per kg.
A rhino can have
6, 7, 8, 9 kgs of horn on it. So you're looking at maybe $1 million on a rhino that is one horn. Ivory is around 10 grand a kg at the moment now, so that's increasing in value. Pangolin scales, pangolin scales are made from the same commodity as rhino horn. Once ground into powder, it can be passed off as rhino horn, and a lot of people are. That's why pangolins are being targeted. So
just touching on that commodity, when you say made from the same commodity, I'm told that it's keratin. Basically, it's your fingernails, your hair.
Exactly. It's nothing. It's got
any nutritional value or make you stronger.
No, it's got no known medicinal properties or enhancing properties. I think it's just traditional culture and belief. The culture and the tradition that has embraced rhino horn, for example, as part of their life for many years. This is not a new thing. It's been around for many years. Is the equivalent of an engagement ring in other cultures. So imagine trying to eliminate the diamond engagement ring from Western culture is like trying to eliminate rhino horn from other cultures. It's large. We all know that diamonds there's blood diamonds, there's real diamonds, there's legal, there's illegal, but it doesn't stop people from buying them. It's so it's a big issue.
Okay, this is such a big topic and it's so complex, but I mentioned earlier that I'd like to touch on the landscape and the fact that everything is obviously in nature is interconnected. Yeah. We as human beings have tried to come and control, and we've laid down boundaries, and yet animals have always kind of roamed freely. So if you want to replicate or create that ability for them to move freely, yet you are focused on one area, how do you now, we've talked a little bit about collaborating with the community, but how would you collaborate with other organizations? And I think I've read and understand that there's quite a lot of conflict in the conservation industry itself. And part of the reason for that is maybe people want to have different opinions about how to run an anti-poaching unit or to put water for animals on the one hand, so different methods of operation. And then secondly, they may be getting funding from an area that they don't want others to know about, because potentially you might take that funding from them. So I just, how do you handle that? Because at the end of the day, the end goal, I think, from everybody is the same thing.
Yes.
To create this pristine environment that everybody loves. Yeah. So how do you get around these sort of internal battles?
It is probably the biggest disappointment in the conservation world that for me at least, you get into this role and you get into this work for wanting to make a difference, as everybody does. Everyone that's in conservation has got some difference that they're trying to make, and an end goal that they're trying to achieve. You're right, it's all very what the end goal is. But the amount of conflict in the conservation world is phenomenal. I've heard about it a lot, but actually now being in the conservation space, it's not necessary. It really isn't. And I think there's things. It's going to take a concerted effort by conservation organisations to try and work more together. When I took over these trusts, we established a brand. It's not really a brand; it's a name, and it'll grow organically over the years. We're not in a hurry to push that brand because our two individual trusts are so strong. But we established a name called the Wildlife Conservation Coalition, and that was exactly the idea, to bring people together, have a united voice for our conservation of this area. Have a united approach to donors, to stakeholders, to the authorities. Get in a room as the conservation folk of our area. Discuss, decide, slash it out, debate it, plot our way forward, whether we're all mostly happy with, and then that's how we approach it, as opposed to each of us going almost working against each other to achieve the same thing.
Right.
And whilst it's great in principle, it's going to take a lot of time, trust, patience, determination to achieve it. We're very blessed in this part of the world. I think I've said it already that we're all mates here. It's such a small community, and there's a bunch of conservation and community-based, not-for-profit organisations in here, just in Victoria Falls, that we all know each other, and we all talk, which is the first thing. You know, just having an open, honest discussion with each other is the most important step. Once you can have that, then there's the opportunity to really start looking at growing collaboration. Further afield, they'll just have to come with time. You start with a handful in a small area, and you just grow. Organizations like CASA are instrumental in being able to achieve things like that. You've got a body now that is aiming to bring collaboration across a huge area. So you've got a common platform in which you can voice your opinions. You can meet other stakeholders. The biggest thing for all of us is that we've got our heads down on the grindstone, all day, every day, and to take time out of your day-to-day job to go and try and build relationships with other people and meet other people is. Even just getting that opportunity to discuss with someone, whereas CASA provides that platform. So it's a massive amount of work that needs to be achieved, but I think it's got to start with discussion, a willingness to change, and just a common understanding that we're all trying to achieve the same thing.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's so much need for what you and other organizations are doing, that there has to be a way for you to collaborate, so that you're not spending so much time worrying about what the next person is doing, and everybody's focusing on one goal. The other thing is obviously being able to project that cohesion and unity to the would-be donor.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's, there could be people here who are sitting across wherever they are, in the USA or in Australia or in wherever they might be sitting watching this, and they've never been to Africa, and they've got their own issues back home. Why should they really care? But they might be sitting on a lot of money. Why should they really care? What's going on out here?
Because I think Africa, South America, maybe a little bit in Asia, are the last strongholds of wildlife in our world. America is looking to reintroduce wolves into certain areas, which I think is having great success, but they've come full circle. They've come from having the wolves, annihilating the wolves, to now trying to bring them back. That's counterproductive. It's a waste of resources. Rather just protect what you have in the beginning, and that's what we're trying to do to our environment now. If we don't win now, we're going to go full circle and have programs in Africa where we're going to try and repopulate our areas with the animals that are currently here. So our goal is to just do that now. I think also maybe along those lines of, why should I care if I'm sitting on the other side of the world about what's going on there? And I think people are becoming more sensitized through a lot of talk about climate change as the one thing, but I think maybe someone like David Attenborough has brought this to light, that if you do something in one place, it can actually really have an effect on other parts of the world. And I think, there's huge discussions now about degradation of soil, obviously degradation of the climate, but I think in ecosystems as well, cutting down rainforests, taking wildlife out, reducing biodiversity. I think David Attenborough talks a lot about, and the concern that by 2030, 40, 50, that once we have eliminated
70% of all biodiversity on Earth, it's going to have huge adverse effects.
Yeah. 100%.
Right into our health.
Exactly.
Into everything. So the work that's being done is critical.
Yeah.
That you say these areas, South America, Africa, parts of Asia, if those areas are not supported, so someone sitting on their couch over there, if they're not supported,
they will be affected.
Then they will be affected.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're seeing it already. I mean, you're 100% right in that there is, very fortunately, in the last 20, 25 years, maybe max, there's been a big shift into focusing on nature. Climate change is big. Global warming is probably the first phrase that was coined by old Al Gore, whenever it was, 20 years ago or so now. But before then, there was no real emphasis on the environment. A lot of emphasis was put on upgrading people and improving poverty around the world and stuff, which is obviously just as important. But the focus that's come onto the environment now is great, because we're on a downward spiral. Even with the attention that's being placed now, we're still on a slippery slope. I don't quote me on this, but I heard a very disturbing statistic that 2017 is the year where we went from the world being able to produce enough resources for more than what we were depleting, to we are now depleting more than the world is able to produce. So we're killing the earth, essentially, and it's not being able to recover fast enough. And that's scary, because, as you say, you could be sitting in your couch in London and not really have any interest in what's going on in Africa, but it will affect you.
Potentially, there's this huge floods in the UK at the moment.
The natural disasters.
And I think people, may struggle to comprehend that something going on in another part of the world could have an effect on the floods. But I think because it's happening more and more regularly, people are starting to potentially wake up.
Yeah. And it's being spoken about more and more. The links are being drawn by this is happening because that happened over there. Whereas 20 years ago, that wasn't really being spoken about. So there is a large level of awareness that's being generated now, and there's a good effort being made to be better global citizens for our environment here. So let's hope it continues.
So I think this conversation has been wonderful, because we sort of started broad and we've gone in and identified some of the sort of on the ground challenges that you are facing in your organization, and then try to look back again at how this affects people, as opposed to just being an interesting conversation of something that's happening over there. But maybe just to drill into it slightly more, what can someone who is now sensitized to what's going on, has listened to you speaking and understanding, what can they do? I mean, they can obviously put some money towards this. What kind of ways can people assist? Look, just as someone sitting there saying, okay, I've got an organization that could potentially help here, or I'm just an individual, like, can I give $10? What's it going to do?
Yeah. So I mean, look, obviously funding is by far our greatest challenge. I mean, it's very interesting. Very few conservation organizations start out with someone with an armful of money saying, I've got a bunch of money, where can I put it? It always starts out with individuals who see a problem, see a need, have an idea or a solution to that problem, but now they've got to go and find the money. And 50, 60, 70% of your life becomes trying to find that money, which is not a skill of ours by any means. I mean, none of us got into the conservation world because we're exceptional fundraisers. We got into the conservation world because we're passionate about fixing a problem. But we very quickly be learning how to become fundraisers. So funding is always the greatest challenge for us. So guys can help by obviously helping us out financially. That would be massive. But also just spreading the word. We are in the game that we play, the not-for-profit game. It's all about networking. We've got to speak to as many people as possible. you never know. You might chat to one person that just completely changes your life and becomes an instrumental part of your organization and allows us to. I would love to get to the stage where we are 100% focused on fixing the problem, not 50% focus there and 50% on trying to raise money to do that 50%. That would be my focus. Would be love to just be fixing the challenges that we've got. And you never know, speaking to as many people as we can, sharing this message as far and wide as possible. There are people out there that have the means to do that. It's just about connecting with each other, and that's the nature of the not-for-profit game. You've got a network.
We haven't mentioned tourism. Obviously, tourism, conservation, wildlife, community, they all interact and go hand in hand. It would seem to me that tourism might be an obvious area whereby a tourist comes into an area, appreciates it, takes their pictures, goes back home with memories. They'll feel that they've contributed by paying to be there. But is there this sort of seamless integration, for example, between your organizations, VAPU and Bhejane, and some of the tourism organizations here? Do you receive funding through them?
So they are biggest supporters. So a lot of the tourism players recognize and appreciate the value of having wildlife around them. They need it for their product to be as attractive as it is. So I would say a good 40 to 50% of our annual revenue comes from the lodges and the hotels and the tourism players in the areas that we operate in, contributing directly to the work that we do, which is massive. Look, I think there's opportunity to get more from the tourism sector, not necessarily the lodges and the players themselves, but from the tourists directly. So we're working on various initiatives where we hope to try and get a lot more visual to the everyday tourist. There's 300,000 tourists coming to Victoria Falls. If each of them could give $10, I mean that's significant. That's our budget, 10 times over, and could allow us to achieve a lot more. And there's a lot of, as I said before, there's a lot of organizations doing fantastic stuff in this town, and only so many lodges and hotels, and everyone is asking the same lodge and the same hotel for money every month. So donor fatigue is a very real thing in this area. But we're incredibly humbled and blessed by the support that we get from the tourism players around here. It's massive. We get a lot of international support as well. So another probably 20 or 30% of our yearly budget comes from people that have fallen in love with the work that we do. Charles, who founded VAPU, he's also a professional guide, does a lot of safaris, flies the anti-poaching flag high whenever he's with his clients. And so, he also meets a lot of people who fall in love with the work, and they go home and it's maybe 5 or 10 or 15 grand a year they just put into our account, which helps a lot. And then we run some events. We run quite a few events, and that is actually that I hate asking for money. I'm terrible at it. It's I'd much rather earn my living and earn my keep. So to go and just ask someone to give us some bucks is always challenging for me. But events I've found is a fantastic way of funding, because people are getting something out of it. We run a golf day in Harare, our capital city, every year. It's been going for about 20 years now. That specifically focuses on the anti-poaching work. It's run and hosted by a fantastic organisation called African Albeda. They've been a huge supporter of VAPU's from the beginning. And that raises 20, 30 grand a year. But people are paying, and they get a fantastic day of golf. They get a lovely meal. They get something for the money. They're not just putting funds in and not getting any other return. So if anyone would like to host a golf day for us back or somewhere around the world, it's always good. It's always fun. So
Excellent. And I'm thinking there could be some young tech gurus out there that could find a way to make people's ability to contribute easier as well.
Yeah.
And there's all this drive to set up money networks, and there's GoFundMe's and there's this kind of thing. But maybe there's a way for someone sitting out there who says, okay, I'll use AI to drive funds to something like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nathan, has been an excellent discussion with you.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot.
Good.
And hopefully everybody who's watching out there is learning. If anybody wants to follow up, they can do so through comments on the channels.
Yeah.
But also, we'll have your details of Bhejane and Vapu up.
Thank you.
For people to find out more. And if they want to do further due diligence about you guys, I'm sure they can get in touch.
Welcome to, yeah.
But thanks very much. It's been a great discussion, and we could talk so much more. But I know you've got to get back out in the field, doing what you need to be doing, and
No, absolute pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for listening to our story, and appreciate the chance to get to chat to you.
Thank you.